Welcome back to the Tech Startup Network podcast. I'm super excited to have Geena Greguric here with us today. Geena is a growth strategist, startup advisor, and founder with a track record of helping companies turn marketing into measurable revenue. With more than a decade of experience across startups and scaling businesses, Geena specializes in go-to-market strategy, brand positioning, demand generation, and growth marketing for companies navigating rapid growth. Geena, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ashley, I'm so happy to be here. Excited to talk some shop today.
Likewise. To kick things off, Geena, I'd love to have you share more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. I always feel like I preamble quite a lot when I give my background, but I feel like it always gives good context. So, just to dive in, I started in marketing, like many marketers out there, majoring in business, also in music, but that is a much longer story for another day. And so, coming out of undergrad, I faced a challenge that a lot of people in marketing and business experience, where I was, specialized in marketing. I wanted to be a marketer, but I faced a lot of sales opportunities. And so was very blessed. Early in my career, I was able to find my way into a B2B SaaS company that was fully bootstrapped, no capital invested at all. And so I came in as their first marketer after years kind of being in their own industry, this B2B company. And they said, hey, you went to school for marketing. We didn't. So do marketing. And so, trial by fire, but it was an incredible opportunity. I got my next degree at that time from the School of Google. I was just looking up every day, what are the biggest and best brands doing? What are the most successful companies doing? And then I was translating that into our industry. And so, that was really my early marketing days, and I was able to grow a ton right off the jump. So from there, I transitioned over into startup marketing. I found my way to startups. I was going to school at the time for my MBA in entrepreneurship, and I started to discover that the startup world really aligned with my aspirations and really my type of personality and how I like to work, scrappy and quick and being a builder. And so I started at Idelic here in Pittsburgh as their third employee. So I was with that company and I came in and ran their marketing and scaled their teams from right around an early seed round all the way through Series B. I stayed on actually as an advisor after the fact until very recently. They just closed and got acquired, which is incredible. But what ended up happening was I always knew I wanted to start my own business and do my own thing.
Mhm.
And whenever I had my first daughter back in 2023, that was really the catalyst for that. So I was looking for more flexibility, and that's when the timing just kind of lined up perfectly. And I started my own consultancy. So since then, I have since had another baby girl. I always say being a stay-at-home mom is my real job, and I moonlight as a marketer. And so when I'm doing my moonlighting, I work with all types of companies. It's funny, I always say tech and SaaS is like my bread and butter, but I really work with all different types of software companies, tech, insurance. I work in a ton of different spaces now, which is really exciting and fun. But yeah, like you said, doing go to markets, doing a lot of branding, doing a lot of, as a fractional leader, kind of guiding their in house team or person if they even have one yet. So
Mhm.
it's been a really exciting ride, and I hope I can bring some information to your listeners today that can be helpful for them.
100%. One of the reasons why I was excited to have you on the show is because of your specialty in really supporting those really early stage companies, which a
Mm-hmm.
lot of our audience tends to be comprised of. And so I would love to hear your advice of what these founders or startups should be thinking about from a marketing and branding perspective as they are in these really early stages. If there's any of first steps that they should take or things that they should
Mm-hmm.
do right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're a founder, I think we all know, especially when you're fundraising, how crazy and hectic and insane that can get, or even pre fundraise, kind of getting ready to. And so, you're doing everything, and you typically don't have a marketer in place yet. It's all on your shoulders. You're the salesperson, you're everything. And so, I always say, you don't want to try to do everything and do it poorly. So, where can you start to think about marketing and branding? Start to tie that into what you're doing on a daily basis. So, how can you find some efficiencies in what you're doing? early stage, typically you should, if you're not, you should be talking to customers almost daily. Your product still isn't where it's supposed to be yet. You're still kind of developing it and probably making some pivots and adjusting to the market demand because you're learning as you go at this point, with an MVP out, and beta testing, whatever that may be. And so I always say tie marketing into that. As you talk to those customers and have those conversations, start to figure out what issues they're trying to solve, start to learn their language. All of this will tie back into your branding. And one of the biggest things, levers that I've seen that works really well lately is founder branding. And so having your founder on, LinkedIn, social media, whatever channel that is, sharing educational content, speaking on podcasts like this, getting out there and talking. And I always say you should have your own, sometimes controversial is good, your own opinion on something that matters to your target market. So don't just be regurgitating and spewing what everyone else is saying. Branding is not just an image. It's not just photos. Yeah, you have your website you're building. Yeah, you may start to some organic social pages if it makes sense for who you're targeting. But start with like a voice and a tone and an opinion and some thought leadership. I hate to use that word because I know it's like the buzzword, but like it really is what you're trying to do is become a thought leader in your space. That is one of the most powerful things right now. I think everyone's getting kind of inundated with AI and AI slop and ChatGPT and all these things. And so people are really connecting right now with human connection, seeing faces. And so that is my number one advice when you're kind of branding super early is to just be a person, start formulating what your company tone and voice is, and then go and put yourself in front of customers. So you don't have to buy the $10,000 booth at the trade show, but just go and be there and talk to people and get to know people and learn. And that's one of the best things you can do for your marketing and also for your product and for your company as a whole.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I love that you mentioned founder-led marketing, and I would love to come back to that in a second because that is such a good topic on its own. But what
Mm-hmm.
I really want to emphasize that you mentioned here is just having that foundation, like being able to understand your messaging and your tone and your voice and your positioning. Like that's really that groundwork. So if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
that set, it's hard to be strategic and intentional from there. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that you brought that up because that really is the first thing that people should really think about. In addition to what you shared of just talking with customers, not only will that guide your product, but as you mentioned, you'll also be able to understand their language and incorporate some of that stuff into your copy and messaging as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so with the founder-led marketing stuff, like let's dive into that because as you mentioned, it's
Yeah.
huge right now. A lot of founders are starting Substacks, they're building their
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn profiles. I think now that it's non-negotiable as a founder to have your own online identity in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to hear more about that from your point of view, like what that entails, why you think it's important, and how founders can get started with just building their personal brand online.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, funny enough, I think when we're talking about building that, you're exactly right. Starting Substacks, getting your LinkedIn going. I mean, if you're in consumer space, starting a consumer, page, and that's like your page, your identity, you as a person. Not separate from your business because that's what's really been driving is that founder led people follow people, people trust people. And so putting your face where you can. Now, I will say that since TikTok and Reels and everything has been picking up on social, and people are kind of started like this era of influencers is so rapidly growing. It is harder and harder to be visible in the digital space. And so there are some things that I recommend doing as you're getting started. So the first is post somewhat consistently, even if it's like once a week, just putting something out there. That's a great start. You'll hear a lot of people say more often than that. I understand founders and I understand early stage, and I get that's not always realistic. So, like, set a goal for yourself once a week and just tie it to what you're doing. I've found that content that's pre-planned too much, it's not as effective. I mean, even if you're on Meta and you schedule out posts, I've seen the performance does not perform as well if you are like editing picking your audio and submitting immediately. And so the social channels are actually like encouraging you to be very in the moment, raw, real. You don't have to be overproduced. You can do like your selfie video, and like that's what people are craving, and that's also what the algorithm is favoring. And so step one, just be real, be raw, take notes from conversations you have. Don't like sit here and brainstorm forever and like fall over yourself trying to think of topics. Post somewhat regularly, and then get out there in front of your customers and start to connect with them. Go to these events, get their contact, connect with them on LinkedIn, or have them follow your social, some type of call to action. Just like that in-person first connection helps you start to establish a loop better, than just going straight to digital, because that's a slow grow. It's not going to go
Mhm.
quick. It's not going to go easy. You're going to get discouraged, because it is slower. And so that's kind of one lever to make that go a little faster, is like pushing it when you're at industry events. Even like I always say, if you're going to go to trade shows, I keep coming to back to events because that just seems to be working really well. I've
Yeah.
noticed lately. If you're going to events, you don't have to do the big 10 by 10 booth with the big expensive vinyl displays. You can just go do some cool guerrilla marketing, have some cool like QR business cards that you maybe sneakily leave about. I know it's terrible advice. They'll take them and throw them away, but we've done it. And but no, really, and go to these events. And if you're going to sponsor at any level, I say there's sort of like two sponsorships I'm looking for. One is something that gets us the list, so the minimum level of
Mhm.
sponsorship to get that list, because the marketing has changed so drastically than it was even 8 to 10 years ago. We were gating everything, and that was kind of the normal, and that was how we were getting contact info. But the age of gated content is over, and so doing a minimum level to get the list, and then you now have like a target, or doing something that gets you speaking or in front of your audience. So anytime you can get up, even if it's just like introducing, the CEO of the association for like a dinner. Anytime you can go on that stage and speak and be in front of people, it gives you a level of credibility that you can't match otherwise. And then if you can do a handout, you say follow us on social for tips on how to do XYZ. So
Mhm.
that's kind of my advice for like there's getting started, and here's some kind of levers to make it go a little faster.
Yes, and I love what you mentioned about trade shows and just the reminder there that you don't need to have the crazy expensive display or booth to make a splash. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think doing the little things, as you mentioned, and especially getting the minimum sponsorship to get the contact list is huge in itself. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think, depending on the conference, I think you actually can get better connections or results by actually just walking around. So not having your own
100%.
display, but like being the person who's actually out there working the floor and networking.
Yep. Yeah, that is one thing. Networking has been really strong lately. I will say, depending on the show, a lot of associations are really dropping the ball on like getting people into the boothing areas. And so you need to look at the schedule, and see like when those hours are if you're going to do it. But I will say, depending on the stage you're at, I mean, some stage and industry, if you're in an industry with a lot of known names, a lot of like really known companies, and you're early, and maybe it's like post fundraise, there are instances where I do say we need to show up big and we need to show up strong and make people think we've been doing this for much longer than we have. Like this
Hmm.
is the hey, let's make them think we're a real company, even if we don't feel like that yet. So that there is a time and place. But if you're trying to be lean, then you can absolutely attend a show for the cost of a ticket and your airplane and hotel. And you can make a lot out of that experience. But you have to go and you have to work.
Yeah, 100%. And you just said something that I want to dive into further, which is the whole idea of kind of making yourself seem like someone bigger
Hmm.
than you really are. And I think that's a huge thing in marketing as an early stage company is like faking it till you make it. I feel like it's a lot of companies say that where they're
Hmm.
like, well, we don't really have much going on right now. Like we're still working on our product. Like there's not much we can say. Like we're just going to stay quiet on social. And it's like, no, you need to fake it till you make
Hmm.
it. Like, make it seem like there's so many big things happening. Show the behind the scenes. So I love that you mentioned that because it's huge. Like just giving off that impression can really carry you so far.
Oh yeah, early on, you're selling the future for the most part. Much to the complaint of product teams, you're selling the future because realistically, if your sales cycle is 6 months long, who knows where the product's going to be at that point? I mean, you have a roadmap, but do you? Like,
Yeah.
things change so fast when you're so early. And so it's like, you're selling the future at this point. You absolutely should be on social, even when it's just an idea. Get a logo and start putting out some educational thought leadership level content. Start building a following, and then all of a sudden you have this free channel to start like building some excitement around launches and things like that. I mean, you should be out there talking about what you're doing. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know who knows what. I was just talking with my friend who's a founder recently, and she said it wasn't until recently I've been on this journey for almost a decade, and I just recently started feeling comfortable telling people I'm a founder of a company. And I
Hmm.
said, yeah, like it, you should be doing it sooner because you don't know who's in that room. You could meet people who are interested in investing. You could meet people who might be. So it's just like, if you're gonna start working those connections, like you have to just be open about it. I know they say like I think the phrase is don't talk about what you're going to do, be quiet while you're building and then, let everyone know once it achieves. That's like the opposite here. Like we want to
Yeah.
be talking about this because there's a lot of people out there you can leverage. And so it's worth it to be open and honest with what you're up to.
Without a doubt. And in addition to what you've shared about just being open as a founder and having that founder-led marketing, what are some other like hot things that you're seeing in marketing right now? I feel like a lot of, or everyone really, is kind of like chasing that next big thing of like, what's going to
Mm-hmm.
bring us the most traction right now? So, of course, this question's a little bit generalized, but are you noticing any like new strategies or tactics that you think's really making some movement?
So I will say I got to keep hitting the nail on the head here with networking and getting out to in person, doing road shows, visiting, hosting like luncheons in kind of metropolitan areas, like really creative in person stuff like that has just been working really well because I think people are kind of tired of being digital. We had a good 4 years where we were kind of forced to be digital, and so people like are kind of craving that human interaction. I also think everyone is sick of seeing like AI faces on like social media and videos. And so like it's just refreshing to hear from people. That's the one I gotta keep hitting on. Two, I will say Chat GPT search has been really picking up lately. I think we all kind of knew this was coming. They just came out with ads. I haven't tested them. I'm doing an event in July, talking with my friend Christina Sims, who is like an AI expert, and so she's going to be talking about AEO a little bit. But Chat GPT has been the source of leads lately. I see that picking up, which again we expected it, but it's time to get on that if you're not
Mhm.
already thinking about AEO. And then, other than those two, I will say partnerships has been big. So, if you're early stage, this doesn't have to be referral partnerships, but piggyback on some bigger companies. So, as you're going in networking, find companies that have synergies with you. Get in touch with their business development teams. Again, this doesn't have to be a product partnership or integration. It doesn't have to be a referral partnership yet. It could be, but even just like putting out content together. Hey, we both talk about this. Let's do a video together or a webinar together, or let's host an event together. Let's host a happy hour at this upcoming trade show. That's a great way to like piggyback on someone who's been around the block and like take some from them. So I will say like partnerships, that's been big for a while. I don't want to say it's like the next best thing, but I'd say like that has been working really well lately. And yeah, I would say if you're in consumer services, sorry, they keep popping up. If
No,
you're
keep
in
going.
if you're in consumer services, meta ads have surprised me. I'm not typically big on meta ads in most cases, especially with tech, but I have been seeing some surprising cases of meta ads and organic, just social, sending leads to clients I didn't think. would. So we tested it and it actually worked. So I will say maybe don't sleep on those quite yet.
Mhm.
Give them a shot. They're worth a test.
Yeah, such good stuff there. And I love that you mentioned partnerships because that is one of my favorite strategies. And even though you, like, as you mentioned, it's not new, but I feel like people often forget about it. Like, there's so much value and credibility that comes with aligning yourself with a company that has similar values to you and shares a similar clientele and being able to provide something of value to your mutual audiences. So,
Mm-hmm.
love that. And I think that's a really good one to focus on. And also too, AEO, I'd love to talk about that further because that's of course really big right now. So with showing up as a source in those major LLMs, like is that something that you're able to talk more about or something you're able to kind of share more advice on?
So I'm not the expert. Like I said, I know the experts. I'll loop them in. But from my understanding so far, it's you actually can't, surprisingly enough, the one of the biggest things I keep hearing is don't rely on AI. So we all know
Hmm.
that writing content, writing copy for your website, kind of the structure behind it. These are all things that help with SEO. AEO and even Google now can spot AI written content. So you have to be original. You can't be having these watered down word salad sandwiches full of AI words. It's just
Hmm.
not, it's not going to help you rank. And so you have to be educational and conversational to answer those questions. And that's how
Hmm.
your content on your website has to appear. Again, I can't express Christina Sims enough. She like is crushes it at that. She can go into more detail, but for me personally, yeah, that's the big thing that I keep hearing. So,
Hmm.
ear to the ground. I'll know more in July, but at this point, that's the one. Is like you can't just be publishing AI slop on your website because AI apparently doesn't like itself very much. So.
Yeah. And I mean, and that goes back to the point that you mentioned earlier that AI slop is why everyone is just exhausted and wants to get back into in-person connections. And I
Mhm.
think you nailed it when you said that's why people are turning to events and all these intimate gatherings together face to face because I think we're all just totally burnt out from what we're seeing online.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. And so with a company that is just kind of starting to get some traction, so they've done the foundational stuff with their marketing, like they have their branding down, they have kind of like their initial marketing channels. What would you say is kind of the next step that they should take to kind of kick things up a notch? If they want to take things to the next level, what are some things
Mhm.
that they might want to keep in mind?
So I really like the framework of traction. I am always thinking in the terms of ROI personally, to the point where it can be a little. My approach is a little more conservative. I consider ROI one of my KPIs for my clients. If they're not seeing a return on investment with their marketing, that's on me. And so I will say I really like that framework because how it works is essentially you shotgun approach. You're going to test 4 or 5 different things, over the course of say 3 months, maybe more depending on bandwidth. Put a little bit of budget into like some channels you've never tried, things you've never done before, and then whatever one really works, you can double down, put most of your budget into that one because marketing's constantly changing. You might think you have your channels down, but I mean, in 6 months, they can easily go stale very quickly. And so you should always be revamping. And then my other kind of word of advice at that stage, too, don't just be testing channels, but also messaging and your value propositions. That can also go stale pretty quickly. Keep your ear to the ground in the industry. I subscribe to Google Alerts in the industries that I work in. I try to stay up on news in the industries that I work in as well. There's going to be waves that happen. I mean, it could be in terms of like an event coming up, as simple as that, or it could be like government mandates that impact your industry. I mean, there's a ton of different things that could happen that really change where everyone's focusing on. And so I like to say, look for the headlines. What is like the big headline you're seeing everywhere? And jump on that quickly. And then tie something, what you're saying to that, or tie your value prop to that if you're able to, if there's any context where you can like loop into that, because then all of a sudden you're getting more eyes on you if you're talking about that topic, bringing in experts to talk about that topic, stuff like that. So I will say, summary: keep testing channels and test your messaging and try to stay ahead of what's happening in the industry. And that's just kind of marketing maintenance. And at that point,
Mhm.
you're busy enough where you either need someone like me, a fractional person, or you need someone on your team at that point. When you're doing that, it's no longer just founder. You're going to need some type of resource.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning the piece about updating your messaging and
Mm-hmm.
going through your website and making sure your copy is where needs to be. Because as you mentioned, like things can get stale or they can get a little bit
Mm-hmm.
old. And I can't tell you how many times I've chatted with startups and I reference something and they're like, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. We no longer offer that." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, it's on your website."
Yeah.
So
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's hard too, because I will say one mistake I see a lot also, it's not just what you're saying, but I've found, because let's be realistic, marketing, when you're early enough, you are basically involved in product. You're hearing from customers just as much as anyone else. It's a team effort. You're involved in just about everything that's going on with the company when it's early enough. And I will say a big mistake that I often see is like, you can sell as best you can, but if the product isn't a need to have and it's just a nice to have, or it's not, the demand isn't there in the space, that's one mistake I often see is founders are really like hesitant or an unwillingness to pivot and kind of change direction, because it's like, oh, we committed so much energy to this idea and this is sort of where I'm staking in the ground. And that can kill a lot of startups, because it's really easy to see the data that you want to see. It's really easy to say, I had one great conversation, there's a product market fit here, and there isn't. Or that's an anomaly, or that's like a one off, or that's maybe an enterprise customer and the TAM just isn't right. And so it's like a bigger picture where like marketing, product, kind of strategic direction for the company are all really intertwined in the beginning. And
Mhm.
you'll see like we can say as much of the right thing as we want about what we do, but if the product market fit isn't right, then it's not going to work in the long run. We might be able to force it and really hard sell like early, but it's going to ultimately lead to your demise if you can't get ahead of that.
Yes, great reminder is just to like make sure that people actually want the product that you're putting out in the world. Because as you
Yeah.
mentioned, like all the marketing and all the sales isn't going to help it if it's a product that isn't really hitting right with the people that you're hoping to sell it to.
Yeah, it shouldn't feel, I mean, it's going to be hard. It's not easy,
Hmm.
but it shouldn't feel like fitting a square peg into a round hole. Like it,
Hmm.
there shouldn't be so much friction when you're
Yeah.
closing these deals or finding the deals or whatever. Even if you have a really long sales cycle, that's okay, but you have to really like hone in on like, is this repeatable? Is this need to have? And in circumstances where maybe the economy is not doing so great, when things aren't so well, where does that leave us as a company? Where does that leave
Hmm.
our solution?
Yeah, definitely. And now, Gina, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is to give a shout out to someone in tech that they're really feeling inspired by right now. So it could be a founder, VC,
Ooh.
community builder, fellow consultant. Would love to hear who you're admiring lately.
Oh, I have a couple of them. Okay, I will give a shout out to Olivia Suchko. She is my co-director of marketing comms on the board of directors over at Get With It, Women in Tech group. And she is doing some really incredible things in fashion technology, which is just such a creative and crazy industry that, like, I've never worked in fashion before. That's not my forte at all yet. But I like just hearing kind of what it takes and what she's up to. It's super inspiring. She's grinding really hard in like a really old, really, tight knit industry and bringing tech to it, which I think is so cool. So I'm going to give her a shout out.
Yeah, that's a good one. Love a good fashion tech shout out.
Heck yeah.
Gina, this has been such a fun episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the podcast. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am online on LinkedIn most often. You can find me at geenagreguric.com, Geena Greguric on LinkedIn. And I recently did just get my Meta profile. So if you're looking for me on Instagram, you can find me under my podcast handle at High Key Growth.
Fantastic. Gina, this has been such a good episode. Thank you so much again for sharing your advice with our listeners today. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Ashley, this has been so much fun. It was great chatting with you.